Confusion and technical difficulties is no way to end a video. I came to the realization that it is going to be impossible for me to build a subwoofer enclosure until I decide what sub I'm going to use. If you guys remember, the plan all along was to use this dual voice coil ADS 308RS. Then, like a toddler seeing a new toy from across the room, I found this JBL 8-inch sub listed on Marketplace right around the corner from my house. So I'm leaning a lot more towards the ADS sub in a sealed enclosure, which I can get away with roughly about 0.6 of a cubic foot of airspace. Now, the appealing part of this JBL sub is I can get away with a smaller 0.42 cubic foot of a vented enclosure tuned to about 50 hertz. The other thing too is if I really wanted to do a sealed enclosure, I can get away with a 0.35 cubic foot on a sealed enclosure with this sub. So to help me make my decision, today's video is going to be all about designing and building a basic sealed enclosure for that ADS woofer. I have built a countless number of sub enclosures in my life, and I picked up a few little tips, tricks to make that basic box look custom. Sub enclosures are measured in cubic feet. So designing your own enclosure will involve a little bit of math. The formula to do this is simply length times width times height, and then dividing it by 1728. My example on screen shows 1 foot long by 1 foot tall by 1 foot deep. 1 foot is equal to 12 inches, so really 12 times 12 times 12 equals 1,728 cubic inches, or 1 cubic foot. I've already worked out all the math and created this 3D rendering in Google SketchUp of a very basic sealed enclosure for the ADS woofer. If any of you guys out there decide to start designing your own enclosure, you got to be careful with what type of material you're going to use, and you got to look at internal dimensions, not overall dimensions. As an example, this enclosure is 17 3/4 inches long. I'll be building this enclosure out of 3/4 inch MDF, and I'm also going to be setting the sides in another 3/4 of an inch for end caps. So that'll leave an internal length of 14 3/4. My total width will be 9 3/4 inches, and if you subtract the 3/4 for the front and the back, you're left with 8 1/4. The height will be at 10 3/4 inches. Once again, subtracting 3/4 for the top and bottom, you're left with 9 1/4. Now, if we take 14 3/4 times 8 1/4 times 9 1/4, we get 1,125.60 cubic inches, or 0.065 of a cubic foot. This 308RS has a woofer displacement of 0.046. We subtract that from the 0.65, and we've got 0.60, which is perfect for this ADS woofer. At this point, I like to make a cut list to stay more organized. I'll have 2 pieces at 17 3/4 by 10 3/4 for the front and back, 2 pieces 17 3/4 by 8 1/4 for the top and bottom, and then 2 pieces 9 1/4 by 8 1/4 for the sides. My cut list is made so I don't have to move my saw a bunch of times, and I also sped this part of the video up not to bore you guys to death. My go-to when buying material is these 2 foot by 4 foot pieces that you can get at any of the big box stores. They're cheap, they're readily available, and they're pretty easy to get home. My table saw makes quick work of cutting all these pieces. You could use a track saw, circular saw. Heck, the first enclosure I did, I used a jigsaw. Doesn't matter, just be careful. Everything's cut, and now I'm prepping for assembly. I'll be marking my front, back, top, and bottom at 1 1/8 inches. This way, when it comes to the final assembly stage, I'll have a nice guide for running my nails into the side panels. Having this mark will ensure your nails are going into the center of your piece of 3/4 inch MDF. Next step in prepping is marking the center of my front panel. I'll be drilling an 1/8 inch hole in that center point so I can get it ready to use this circle cutting jig on my Ryobi router. This 1/4 inch spiral bit cuts a perfect circle. Then to finish the sub opening, I drill a 1/4 inch hole in the groove to get it ready for my spiral flush trim bit on my router table. My 1 7/8 rabbiting bit was loaded in my router table so I could recess the sub into the front panel. My dust collection may need a little bit of work. As you can tell, I am covered in MDF dust, and that's the problem with MDF. It gets everywhere and it's a freaking mess. But it's what I've always used. Got my front panel cut out with the woofer. The 7 1/4 inch hole fits perfect. Sub's a little recessed in. And there's not a whole lot of movement, so that's going to work out perfect. I've got everything else ready to go, so let's start assembling. I decided to speed this part of the video up because honestly, I tried to watch it at normal speeds and it was like watching paint dry. As you can see, I started building my outside framework first. Using a scrap piece of wood as a spacer for my end caps, laying down a bead of glue, lining up my edges, and then nailing it together. I'm using 18 gauge nails that are 1.25 inches long. This is 3/4 inch MDF. You'll need something longer than that, but don't go crazy and get something like 3 inches. Don't be stingy with the glue. Remember, the glue is what's going to hold this thing together and seal it up. The purpose of the nails is to hold it together while the glue cures. I always spread out my glue on my edges, and I will always run another bead of glue on the inside of my joint just to give it strength and help it seal a little bit better. Start with one corner first when you're nailing in your front and back panels. Go to another corner and make sure to keep all your edges in line and your enclosure square. Once everything's lined up, follow the lines you drew earlier as a guide and start nailing away. So the assembly phase is over, and if you can tell, this turned out pretty dang good. Now, if you notice, and I don't know if you guys can see this on camera, but that is not flush like it is on this side. Well, real easy way to be able to do this. I'm going to go ahead and load up a flush trim bit and run flush trim bit on the top and on the bottom. And then, to be honest with you, we're good to go. It's going to be nice and flat and perfect. So before I run a flush trim bit on this, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about my end caps. And I have done subwoofer enclosures like this for, honestly, probably about a decade. And the reason why I like to use end caps is because when you're wrapping this in any type of material like carpet or vinyl or suede or whatever you want to do, you got to do something with the sides here. And you have to, you know, sometimes you can gift wrap it, you can fold it over. And to me, that just doesn't look like a finished piece. So if I can independently wrap a piece and put it in here, it makes a real nice finished piece. So let's make some end caps. We already know that we're 8 1/4 here and 9 1/4 here, right? 8 1/4, 9 1/4, because that's what our rendering is. And the carpet I'm going to use is pretty thick, and you'll have 2 runs of carpeting. So realistically, let's cut 2 pieces of 1/2 inch, 8 by 9. I guess we're running the top through a flush trim bit and all 4 corners through a 3/4 inch roundover bit. Hey, there's an end cap. So besides making an absolute disaster of a mess, I built this. And actually, it turned out extremely, extremely well. My end caps, what I was trying to explain, will go right in here, and these will be compensated for the material. And I even rabbited it out the back side here so I can tuck material in and cut it along here so it'll sit nice and flush. I took that 3/4 inch roundover bit and did all four corners. So now this looks like a pretty custom enclosure. I got to clean up a little bit, and then I'll show you what I got in store to mount the sub. So I cleaned up a little bit, and I wanted to show you guys what I thought about for mounting the sub. So I'm doing something a little bit different than I usually do, and that is these guys, these little wood inserts. And I've got some hex head screws that I'll go ahead and put in here. So if you'll look, probably the easiest way to install these guys in here. I am sure there's somebody out there that's going to tell me I'm doing this wrong, but you know, this is the way I've done it. Put a little CA glue there, put that guy there, and then grab a pair of your little channel locks and push your insert in there. My brother loves it when I do that. And then there you go. Now I got to do that a couple more times. One thing I will tell you I will do is when I'm drilling out these holes, I will put a piece of wood behind the hole, because don't forget, this is MDF, and the last thing you need when you're trying to do this is the back blowing out on you. So now let us install the rest of these. Oh, wait, wait, wait. 1, 2, 3. The last one for Anthony. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. As you can tell, the ADS woofer fits real nice in here. I got to wrap this in some type of material. I don't know if I'm going to do vinyl or carpet, or this is just going to slide off to the side of the garage and never get touched again. Who really knows? If you remember from the Jeep videos, I was going to utilize this grill, so I kind of may make something to go on the front here. Not 100% sure. Be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.